Yes, Matt, I'm here.
Appreciate the time. I guess, have you, I know you've talked about using health apps for various reasons in the past with players' health. Is there an app or a technology that you guys plan to use to track the well-being or even monitor COVID-19 within your team or the campus?
No, I don't believe that there's a particular app that we'll be using. We'll continue to use our science-based apps that will track player load and fatigue. But Matt, we'll continue to, first of all, obviously, as you know, we will test, we will temperature check, we will use personal spacing and distancing. Obviously, you know, and you've been, everybody is well versed on all the CDC guidelines. So I don't know that you want to keep going through this with me, but we're going to have to, you know, use masks in our training. We're going to use masks indoors for our training. When we get outdoors, we're going to take the masks off. So we've got all of those things in place, but there won't be a particular app, Matt, that we'll be using per se relative to tracking temperatures. We will do temperature checks as well every single day to monitor all of our players.
And then my second question is kind of recruiting related. Have you heard from the NCAA on when you may be able to get recruits on campus? And if so, if there's a possibility that they would be able to come in for games?
Yeah. So we know we're not going to see them through the month of July. That seems to be pretty clear. So now we get into August and everybody's wrapped up in camp. We don't see to be that that's going to be reasonable. School starts on the 10th. So we seem to think that with all the precautions that are being taken relative to your own campus, relative to testing, how is it that you can fly in somebody, a family that hasn't been tested, put them up on your campus, in your hotels, and let them walk around campus freely? I just seem to think that it's going to be hard to navigate through this in the fall. So there's still work to be done. I don't think it's going to happen quickly. If it does happen, we'll be excited about it, but we'll be very cautious and we'll have to ask a lot of questions. So I guess the long answer to the question is we're operating as if you will not visit this campus this recruiting season, and we have to take our campus to you.
Awesome. And then lastly, kind of piggybacking off of Pete's question, I know a lot of your staff put out messages in support of the Black community over the last couple of weeks. Did you as a staff have a meeting on what that message should be, or did you kind of leave that up to them to make their own decision?
I thought it was important that the most, I think, important meeting was with our team and making sure that everybody in our football team understood what was most important, and that as a team that you had a voice, and we wanted to make sure that that voice was heard. And then from a coaching staff, I wanted them to be free to express their own feelings and their own opinions. And so that wasn't crafted, that wasn't talked about, that wasn't held in a meeting forum. The only meeting that was held was to bring our team together and really give them a platform and an opportunity to voice their concerns and what we needed to do moving forward.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Coach, the next questions will come from Eric Hansen of the South Bend Tribune.
Okay, Eric.
Hey, Coach, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, Eric.
I know that you referenced the schedule that's going to be coming out Thursday from the Oversight Committee. I'm curious, how comfortable are you with kind of the structure that they're going to let you work under? And then also, when do you feel like in that structure you're going to get a sense of, you know, what your team is like? For example, Jeremiah Wusu-Kormo was a guy that kind of accelerated through the off season and so forth. When will you get a sense of ascending players like that and position competitions?
Well, I still think it's going to take time through August because, the summer access is 2 weeks of walkthroughs. So you're not going to be able to see much in the walkthroughs. That's really going to be spring installation, if you will. That's going to be all the install that you didn't get in the spring is really going to take place during that period of time. So those 2 weeks with a football, that period of time, will be meetings of install. They won't be an opportunity to see the skills kind of on display, if you will, because that's kind of the genesis of your question. You're going to have to get into football related activities and movement, and that doesn't happen until, for us, if we play on the 5th, that doesn't happen until the 7th of August. So we'll be a few weeks into camp before we're able to really make those kinds of football impact kind of decisions.
I know that you were just on a show here about a half an hour or so ago, and you mentioned in it that the games scheduled for the NFL stadiums might be moved back to the campuses. How realistic do you think that's going to be, and what are the positives of making such a move?
I think those are all under consideration. They're not my decisions to make. I was answering a question as to what are the things that are kind of in flux right now. And
okay.
One of the things that we have to kind of keep in the context of what our schedule looks like is, what happens in the Big Ten, what happens in the Pac-12, because those are the two impactful games that influence our schedule outside of Navy, Western Michigan, because we feel pretty whole, or we're going to be feeling as though we can be whole with the ACC. So that, coupled with the venues, become schedule issues that Jack Swarbrick is going to have to negotiate and work out. The NFL is talking about capping attendance in stadiums. So questions come up like, does it make sense to go to an NFL stadium that seats 60, 70, 80,000 and have 25,000 or 30,000 in it and impact the gate to a level where you can't afford really to be there because it becomes a losing proposition? So I suggested that those are more things that have to be worked out, Eric, before we can say this is the schedule. So we've got a couple of months, but I think these are the things that people should keep an eye on that still need to be massaged.
Last one from me is you added a couple of grad transfers recently, Nick McLeod and Trevor Spates, if I didn't butcher their names.
That's good.
What do you like about those guys, and are they going to be with you through the whole summer?
We'll start with the likes. We wanted maturity and player maturity, as well as veteran maturity. These guys are guys that we did our research on in talking to coaches. They're well respected in their locker room by their teammates. So we're inserting guys into a strong culture, or winning culture, that we don't have to be concerned with. Secondly, they've got a pedigree. Although we know Trevor's been banged up, we feel like very confident after sharing medical information with our team that with a clean bill of health, he is going to be a really fine football player for us. So we feel like we've added both ends, maturity in the locker room and guys that can play at those positions of need at a high level. So they were need positions for us as well, and we addressed them.
And you, as far as, are they going to be on campus with you all summer?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, they will be enrolled and part of our immediate program beginning in June.
Thank you.
Okay, Coach. Allison Hayes is up next from ABC 57.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, Allison.
Can you see me?
I can see you too.
Okay, I see you now. Hi, welcome back. It's good to talk some football finally in the summer.
No doubt, Allison. I can hear you.
Well, the first question I have is just, finally having the opportunity to get your players back on campus and to really be able to see them in person. I imagine these guys they're like your kids to you, they're your sons. How much do you look forward to just having that personal connection with them once again, beyond just football?
It's going to be great to see them. We miss them. It's been hard, I mean, you're in it for the relationships, and to be Zoom talking to them for 3 months is there's only so much you can do. You can get some work done, but you can't get the kind of work that you want to get done with your players with their development. So it'll be nice to see them, even though we can't really work with them right now. It'll be our strength staff, because we're in voluntary virtual activities for us as coaches. So, but it'll be nice to see them on campus. We'll be able to run into them. But again, it's nice to get this process moving.
And you said that you've had the opportunity to speak with them on racial topics and issues. Are there resources available through the university, through your support staff, for them with racial issues, but also with maybe mental health issues of dealing with the pandemic and quarantine and things like that?
Yeah, and our team has been, and again, when I say our team, our entire athletic department team, including mental health specialists in our field of sports psychology, have been available to our players, and they've used them during the pandemic. So this is something that our players know as a resource. If they need somebody to talk to, they've been there, and they'll reach out, as well as talking about other issues that are part of our society today. We have a great team throughout our campus, and it just doesn't stop, within football. It cuts across our entire athletic department. And so our players know, and they clearly understand when they need to. And if not, we're there as coaches to present those options to them.
And looking ahead at the season with the change of venue, now no longer in Ireland, now in Annapolis, what set of challenges does that maybe pose to your coaching staff, but also to the support staff in getting prepared? Is it maybe a little easier because you're not going so far, or is it more challenging because you've already put so many things into place?
No, I think it'll be an easier transition for us to go to Annapolis than making the trip to Ireland. Though I will say, if we weren't, obviously in this pandemic, the trip was not a difficult trip. There is a lot of moving pieces, but we were comfortable making the trip if it was in a normal circumstance. But moving it to Annapolis will be a pretty easy situation for us. Now, we're going to enter into some, situations relative to testing the week of the game. We've got to work through those things. That's a whole new lifestyle for us. So we've got to figure that out. But it'll be an opener for us, and we're excited about it.
And just the last one for me, just when you talk about the COVID testing, kind of twofold, are you testing daily? Is it weekly? Is it just on players who show symptoms? And then is there a plan in place if there is a second wave of COVID, and how you salvage the season?
So we'll begin, as I mentioned to you before, we'll begin our voluntary workouts with everybody will have tested. So you will not be able to get into the football building unless you've been tested and you have tested negative. So that begins the process for us. Then it becomes CDC guidelines relative to masks inside, personal distancing, temperature checks, and then we will then begin the process of every 2 weeks. As we enter a new phase, we will begin the process all over again. And as we work our way all the way to camp, we will be in the same process. Then we get into weekly testing for games. I think we're, obviously in a situation where everybody is going to be testing weekly that plays in the NCAA. So that is across the board. I don't know what everybody else's procedures are going to be, but we will begin with everybody negative going into the building. And then as we pass through each gate every 2 weeks, we'll test again and move through those gates.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Coach, next up is Tim Priester from Irish Illustrated.
Brian, as it relates to COVID-19, what has it been like in dealing with your players from a distance, and what have you learned about or seen from your players and coaches during this time?
Boy, I think I just, that there are so many things that you can do and accomplish, even if you've done them all your life one way, that you can accomplish so many things if you just come together and you talk about it and you find solutions. And we found solutions to voluntary, virtual weight training. We found solutions to online learning. We found solutions to continuing our SWAT teams. And I just think that the power of communication has taken over. And if you're doing a really good job, Tim, communicating and touching base, you can accomplish a lot of things. You don't have to be face-to-face meetings every single day. You can do these things through proper forms of communication. So I think, the onset of this horrific time that we've gone through has opened up our eyes that if we're just better at the fundamentals, we can still get a lot accomplished.
Did any parents or players express a concern about returning to campus? Did you discuss that with anyone?
No, but what we did say was that this was not a mandatory event, that you don't have to come back, obviously. What we're giving you is all of these protocols and procedures. But if you feel uncomfortable, you need to let us know. You're not going to lose your scholarship. We're not going to pull your scholarship if you don't want to come back. These are very difficult times. Call us, talk to us, tell us what your concerns are, and maybe we can make the adaptations necessary to accommodate. So we've been fortunate that we've had a few phone conversations about some things that enlightened us that we're learning about, but it's been a very productive conversation with those that have had additional questions about certain things on the reintegration.
And then with regard to the 12-game schedule, other than, as you mentioned, the possible change of venue, do you anticipate that schedule being played the way it is set now? Is the Pac-12 still a concern that you'll be able to play those 2 games against those opponents?
Well, we're hopeful. We don't have anything tangible. I think, Tim, as much as we do. Certainly, Jack has had some conversations, but we don't have anything that we can tell you publicly that we've got a confirmation from the Pac-12 and the Big Ten that these games are definitely going to happen. Once we do, we're going to make it public because we want that to be binding. So we're kind of in the same boat. We're waiting for some further clarification on those things, but we've got some backup plans as well.
We kind of like it to be binding too, so we can schedule some flights.
Yeah, I understand totally.
Hey, last night you were with Scott Van Pelt, and you may have addressed this when you talked about the Unity Council and the local government and the national government, but I just want to clarify because you said, I failed as a leader in my platform to make the kind of change that was necessary to not let something like this continue to happen. Is that what you were referring to, or is there something that the players brought to you that was more than that?
No, it wasn't the players. I'm in a very, look, I've run a foundation for the last, 10 years that has made incredible change and affected hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people's lives in a positive way. And I sit here now and I look at, you know, our country and see the systemic cultural, you know, racism that is still there. And I feel like I missed it. If I could have been focused in on something that was still there, I could have made a difference. And so, you know, we're focusing, my wife and I are focusing our attention in other areas and eradicating systemic racism is one of those areas. And that was my comments last night on Scott Van Pelt.
Last thing, you also mentioned about probably having a smaller playbook when the season starts. How much is that tied to the 14 missed practices in the spring?
Well, I think the comments are tied to not really being able to dive into the specifics of what we lost in the spring yet, to be able to determine how far we can go with our playbook in those 25 practices. In other words, how much of a difference does it make when you don't take snaps in the shotgun for 14 practices? Does that affect what you look like in August? Does it affect what it looks like when you don't get routes on air and 7-on-7 and pat and go for 2.5 weeks? Does that affect what it looks like in the first week of August? I'll better be able to answer those questions when I see the first 3 or 4 days of practice. And so I'm preparing for a shorter playbook because I think it's going to affect us. And because of that, I want everybody to be prepared that there'll be more to come after week 1.
Thank you.
Yes.
Next up is Pete Sampson from The Athletic.
Brian, I was curious, you sort of referenced this a little bit earlier, but the thoughts of how you hold staff team meetings in person, and then how you sort of adapt to that if, you know, a quarterback tests positive or a coach tests positive, so you can avoid the entire group being lost.
Well, I think the first thing that we tried to make certain that we all were aware of was when we got together is make sure you have a replacement. Because what happens when you go down? So, and putting together, you know, all of our meetings, what happens if Tommy Rees gets sick? You know, where do we go? You know, and for that matter, what happens if I go down for 2 or 3 weeks? Where are we going? And so the mandate was, let's not be in silos. Let's not be in silos of information. Let's share information so everybody clearly knows what path we want to take with regards to everything that we're doing, a great amount of transparency. So all of our meetings have been, you know, these Zoom meetings with great transparency and great interaction on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to have to continue to do that as we move forward so we can shift and move and hand off information as necessary.
Some schools have done this, some haven't, but when you go through the testing later this month, do you anticipate Notre Dame announcing, hey, we have 2 players who tested positive, or 2 members of the football program, you know, something of that nature that alerts people essentially how you guys are doing?
You know, Pete, I've seen that as well, and it's a really good question, and I don't have an answer for you. You know, I would defer that to Katie and how that is going to be delivered. It's not one that I could give you an answer to. I think you'd have to take that up with Katie.
Sort of changing gears a little bit to the sort of social circumstances, and you know, you have the meeting last Monday, and I think there's a difference between, hey, we're going to support you as players, and we're going to amplify your message through our channels, whether it be, you know, Twitter or Instagram or just sort of on the Notre Dame website with Braden Lindsay's essay. What sort of led you to go to option number 2, to not just say, hey, we're listening, but we're going to amplify what you have to say as a player?
Because our players aren't outspoken. They're articulate in their message. They're thoughtful. they have passed through all of the filters of response, and so I felt comfortable in talking to Jack and talking to Katie that we could immediately open up our platforms to our players, because I was so confident that we would get the kind of just from the heart what they're feeling, and so it was important to be real about it and not just paying it lip service, and so that was what kind of generated it to me, and being around these guys and know who they were and why they chose to come to Notre Dame.
You sort of touched on this a little bit, but some of the maybe specific actionable items that, you know, you think might work for your program, you know, it'd be voter registration. I think Georgia Tech has sort of said, you know, the voting day in November would be sort of a non-team activity day. Some different schools have put out some different things. Like what appeals to you based on the feedback you've gotten from your players?
Where I'd like to start is a unity council where I have some of essentially a cross-section of players, from our younger players to our most veteran players, that represent the thoughts and the ideas of where they want to make an impact. It might start in our locker room, and I hope it does. Some actionable items that we need to do to be better in all the things that we're talking about. And then what can we do on campus as a unity council? And I want it to grow from within this council, this unity council that represents us. So we start there, where we have voices there that can create this. I don't want to be the driver of it. I want to be able to guide it. And then I think, you know, it's as I told our guys, I said, look, this is about who you elect locally as much as it is who you elect nationally. And just gave them a little bit of what my thoughts were in terms of what we could do, you know, locally. And then as their time becomes a little bit easier to manage, then maybe you can start to scope it from a national perspective if you have more time. So that's the more actionable items.
And lastly, real quick, the players on the Unity Council, who is that comprised of, or the coaches and support staff as well?
I've just developed it. It will not just be players. We will have some support staff that is on the council as well. And we're going to have, again, a cross-section, male, female, African-American, Black, white, Hispanic. We think it really needs to be a great cross-section, and bring your voice and allow us to really do some really neat things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Coach, next up is Mark Skoll from WNDU.
Hey, Coach. During a time like this with the coronavirus and everything that has been going on in the country, how important is the culture of a college football program, and do you like what you've seen from yours?
Well, I think the culture of any football program is on display during adversity. And when adversity hits, I think the true culture of any program is a bright light shines on it, and you get to see it for what it really is. And I'm proud of our players. I'm proud of our coaches. We're not perfect. We have things that we've got to get better at. I've mentioned our Unity Council needs to work. We need to work on things that we can be better at when it comes to dealing with racism and dealing with social inaccuracies that are on our campus, that are in our programs. And so, look, nobody's got this thing locked down as being perfect, but I think that adversity shows your culture, and I think we've got a strong one, and we've got strong players that have the ability to overcome, you know, these adverse times.
Now, what do you think you can get out of your team once practices start and you say, hey, we're moving in the right direction. We're moving towards what I want my football team?
I have no idea. I have no idea. We've had like 12 weeks of sitting on the couch. These are highly motivated, extraordinary athletes that are passionate about playing football, but they are deconditioned. Matt Bayless will be challenged and his staff over the next month to gradually bring this team back to what level they need to be at before we even start to talk about getting into a three-point stance. So I have no idea right now. My expectation is because of the makeup of our group and the staff that we have, we'll get them back there. But to really give you an indication of what they're going to look like right now, hard to say.
Last one from me. Coach, what do you imagine the game atmosphere to be like the first time you run out of the tunnel at Notre Dame Stadium in the fall?
Well, I think you're going to everybody's just going to be so excited to get back to the release and just, get away from how difficult times we have gone through and that we can really enjoy just watching a game and putting it in perspective that this, in fact, is just a game. We don't have to boo. We can cheer. We can cheer these student athletes. You don't have to cheer for me, but you can cheer these student athletes and just take in a Saturday afternoon at Notre Dame Stadium and take it for what it is, just a special place.
Thank you, Coach.
You're welcome.
Coach, our last reporter is Lou Samoji.
Never
Coach,
laugh.
can you hear me?
I can, Lou.
Okay, good, but you can't see me, so there's a blessing there too.
No, you.
What I wanted to ask was that once the players are quarantined in the Morrison, how are they limited with contact with like non-staff members? And I'm talking like hotel staff. And can they go out and run? Can they throw passes on their own or have meals together? How does that all work?
Those are good questions. So, during the first phase, and again, I want to emphasize that being in the Morris Inn and selecting the Morris Inn is because they have a lot of experience dealing with students that were there during the height of the COVID pandemic. So they are well-versed in understanding the virus and all of the CDC guidelines that go with it in terms of, distancing, sanitizing, personal distancing, all of those things, meals preparation. So right now, most of our meals will be pick up and go meals. We are in discussion about having tables that would be 6 feet apart and the potential for one meal where we would have less than 5 at a table, 20 in a room at a time, 6 feet apart, served by servers that have masks. So that would be one meal a day, and that is still in discussion at this point. But they will have to stay on campus during this period of time, and their interaction is limited to our strength staff. If a coach is getting contact with them, they have to have masks on, and that is strictly set up by the procedures through Dr. Leisler and Rob Hunt.
And with all that social distancing, I mean, they can't like work out on their own. This is all organized workouts in groups at certain specific times. That's
correct. That is correct. Now, when you are in quarantine, we will have quarantine workouts that are that we will not supervise, but we've given instructions as to what they're allowed to do. Those will take place in another site and those will be band workouts. In other words, rubber band workouts. And those will be at another site, and that is when they're in quarantine. So if you're in a 7-day quarantine prior to our first test, because you cannot get into the building, we will not have staff with you, but we don't want you to go during quarantine downtown, right? And affect that quarantine. So we have come up with workouts and things that you can do on your own.
Okay. Okay. Recruiting-wise, you were scheduled for a huge recruiting visit weekend on March 20th through 22nd. Obviously, that was canceled, and there have been setbacks there as far as just being able to take the on-campus visits. How much did it affect just not being able to be on campus in the overall spectrum for the recruiting?
I don't know. I mean, you know, we're grinding through recruiting like everybody else. I mean, I think we've had, you know, some really good gets. We've missed on a couple, but it's really competitive when everything is online like this and everybody is doing Zoom meetings and nobody can have anybody on campus. It's, you know, everybody loses something. You know, we certainly lose something by not being able to, you know, get you out of your state and bring you up to Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it. But, you know, everybody is dealing with the same situation. But we'll get ours, and we're going to lose some, but we're going to keep being who we are. We're going to keep working hard. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, we're going to be fine. We're going to have a great class, kids that fit Notre Dame, that we can develop into being outstanding football players that can help us win a championship.
Okay, Coach, that wraps it up for us today. Thank you so much for your time. For all the media members, the full video will be available on our website at und.com/pressbox here shortly. Thank you very much.